Hello, everybody. I'm Grace Bubeck, and this is a pre-recorded session with Tim Freke for the Awakening as Love online retreat. So, hi, Tim. Welcome. Hi. And so, just to say thank you very much to Tim for joining us. And Tim I invited Tim because he's a prolific author. He impressed me by an email footer line that he had, which said, "Love is a political act." I thought that was great. Tim has written a book. His most recent book is The Mystery Experience, and he talked about this on Bad Gap with Rick Archer, and I was very intrigued by that and by his impassioned plea for not opting out of this embodied human life. So, Tim, I'm very happy to talk to you about what it means to awaken as love and how to live that.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's my favorite subject, Grace, so you had me right from the title.
Good. Would you like to start off just off the bat, kind of saying what's the most important thing for you to say about this topic?
Well, I can say this. For me, the whole journey which I have written about as awakening and talk about as awakening has always really been about love. I first experienced it when I was a little boy. That moment of the transformation of perception and of feeling and of what you experience life to be, that I now call being deep awake. But the thing which marked it out when I was 12 was love. That right from this, and then all the way through, reconnecting with it through all these so many different avenues. The one thing which has always been there, and it's still there today. And so when I go around the world sharing with people and running retreats and things, my aim is always, if someone comes out, and I want them to feel the love. I want them to actually feel that embodied love of being, love of each other, love of life. For me, I think I wrote it in response to your question when you invited me, was there's really nothing else. Words like awakening, I can let them go, really. Words like non-duality, I don't even know what that means sometimes. Love seems to span the whole thing. So it's a word that has been very close to me all my life, and it points to an experience which is the only experience which makes sense of life, not by explaining it in any way, but because when I feel immersed in that big, all-embracing love, the questions dissolve, and that, I think, is the perennial message at the heart of all forms of spirituality that I've written about.
Yeah. So I guess my question to you would be, Tim, the love that you're talking about. I mean, on your website and in what you write, you talk about it a lot as an experience.
Yes.
And, as we all know, experiences come and go.
Yes.
So, so that can't be the ultimate reality. Because the ultimate reality has to be there. I mean, it's like it can't come and go. What is real can't come and go. What is ultimately real can't be coming and going.
I think you're completely right, Grace. But as you so eloquently said, all experience is relative. All experience is in to use the philosophical term, duality. It's
Mhm.
subject and object. It's experience of something. So all experience. Well, as everything we experience is an experience,
Mhm.
even the experience of awakening, it seems to me that everything comes and goes. I mean, literally, consciousness comes and goes, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know. It rises up from the deep sleep state, and then it falls back down into it, and there's a natural flow of
Mhm.
energy which rises and falls, and invigoration in a lifetime through birth, middle age, and death. So
Mhm.
there's a flow of all these things. So for me, it's like, okay, look, the whole point or the whole beauty of this experience of duality, of separateness, of individuality that we have, of manyness,
Mhm.
is that this is where we experience things. So the one can only come to know itself or experience itself by being many. And that is the perennial message I see in all mythologies and in the perennial philosophy. And I think it's a very simple but profound message. So here we are having experience. So the love is in experience. People, I hear people talk about love as if that is the ultimate, and poetically I say the same thing sometimes. But really, if I was going to be more precise, it feels to me that love is what arises in Tim when
Mhm.
Tim recognizes that his very depths are the oneness.
Mhm.
The depths of the depths which is expressing itself as Tim is the oneness of being. And when Tim sees that, in other words, an experience in separateness
Mhm.
through an individual human being, that I feel then this profound connection with everything and everyone,
Mhm. Yeah.
and that's love. So love is a feeling, love is a thought, love is a spiritual state, love is a political act. If you take it out into the world, love is a whole
Mhm.
spectrum of things arising from the recognition of oneness.
Mhm.
There's a line which captures it for me, which I use a lot, Grace, which is that love is how oneness feels. So
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
if I think about any love, like a love for my daughter, say,
Mhm.
it's because we are separate and not separate. She is separate from me. She is an individual. I want her to become
Mhm.
more and more of an individual and more separate.
Mhm.
And yet, but underneath that beautiful separateness, there is also a connection where we're one, and therefore I feel this love. And for me, the spiritual journey is discovering that there is a deep connection of being with everyone,
Mhm.
and that when you sink back into that, there's this agape or compassion or big love, which
Mhm.
can hold everything in it. Love so deep, as they say, in the Gnostic Christian tradition, you have this absolutely fabulous line, probably I think the greatest line in literature. A love so deep you can love your enemies. I mean,
Mhm.
that is phenomenal, isn't it?
Mhm.
That you're talking about a love which you can, is that expansive. So
Mhm.
that's how I see it. But the love is something that Tim feels, or you feel,
Yes.
from recognition of the absolute.
Yes. And of course, you're totally right. The paradox is that the recognition of oneness has to occur in a separate individual.
Yes,
Otherwise, it wouldn't be a recognition,
yes. The
So,
one expresses itself as someone, and then we have what the thing which you and I and all the people who are here with us in the future listening in
mm,
are individuals who, I mean, ironically, have become more individual. That always strikes me as a beautiful paradox, that the people who are in the process
yes.
of waking up to oneness are
Mm,
not less of a someone; they're more of a someone. They've they've thought for themselves. They've not just followed the herd in their culture.
yeah.
They've individuated, as Carl Jung said, and through that process of becoming more and more their own self, thinking for themselves, finding their own way, becoming ultimately their own teacher, not relying on external sources, looking to see their own awakening.
Mm,
Through that individuation of becoming more and more of a someone, through that arises this deeper consciousness, this awakening to the one. And for me, that captures beautifully this incredible paradox that we're in, of being separate and not separate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. So let's talk about this some more, because I think that's very juicy. That paradox.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, very.
Because when you're saying, it's just good to be clear.
Yeah.
When you're saying through that process of individuation, I mean, there's two kinds of individuation, isn't there? There's the individuation that's a conditioned one, that's usually called the ego kind of, the development of an egoic self. And actually that egoic self tends to be very predictable. It tends to be quite boring in a way and not very alive, right? So we're not talking about that. My sense is that we're talking.
But you see, I think.
Okay, go ahead.
I think what we need to do is actually question a lot of the spiritual assumptions, which have not been very well thought through, in my humble opinion.
Okay.
So it feels to me, look, we come in, we develop a ego. The word, let's get right down. Ego just means I am. It's an I. We develop a sense of being a individual with their own psyche, their own soul space, their own ability to think their own thoughts. And as you say, the initial period, as you come in as a child, inevitably you are sucking all of that in unconsciously. So we can call it conditioning or programming or whatever. And that is right. And so therefore that is all very predictable, because what you're doing is you've got a set way of reacting which you've learnt from the world around you. Although all the way through there's this little spark, isn't there? This little spark of something deeper going, woo, woo, and you can see it in kids all the time. And as they get older, that comes out more and more. Now the key thing is, does that conditioning, which is precious, this is not a bad thing. If we did not have conditioning, we would not be able to speak to each other now. These funny noises I'm making would be meaningless. The whole, our heritage, the conditioning habit is a really good thing. We need it. And this demonizing of it is a kind of nuts. What we don't want to do is just get stuck on it. We have to use it as a foundation. And if we then grow beyond it by becoming more conscious for ourselves, by doubting, by questioning, by opening things up inside the mind, by experiencing more things with the heart, going through all of these different processes that life offers us, then we don't get stuck in something which is just that primitive conditioning. Now that will still be there, which is why all of us can suddenly find ourselves back there, like a knee-jerk reaction, where psychologically we're just acting from there. But that's only a foundation from which we become more ourselves. We become more individual, and that I think is what life wants. I think the place where I differ, I think, to some people who are exploring this, is that I don't think this is all some big mistake, which is we've got to wake up from and go, oh yes, I was caught in that illusion. I'd come into the world and develop a separate self. What a disaster that was. I'd learned to think, oh, another disaster. If only I could get rid of my individuality and stop thinking. It's like, great, I've just done everything wrong. If I wasn't human, I'd be all right. It doesn't feel like that to me. It feels like no nonsense. The process is perfect. We've come in, we've developed a separate self, then from that foundation we need to just keep going. We have a mind, it's an ambiguous thing. We need to think clearly. If we think habitually, it'll be troublesome. If we think clearly, it'll be insight. And that's its ambiguity. And so to build on the ego and allow it to express itself. So the thought I'm trying to get out here is really this, that the formless, the absolute, as you called it, my sense is it wants to come into form. That's what it's doing. It wants to come into form and experience form. So it wants to individuate. It wants to be separate. It wants to be individual. That's the whole point that we're of having this experience. The problem is that when we in that process, we get lost in the separateness. The spirituality is simply about seeing the oneness through the separateness.
Mm-hmm.
So connecting, instead of just seeing separateness, and then reaching through and going, I see, Grace, you're separate from me, and that's what's so beautiful about you, and you're not. And that's even more amazing.
Mm.
And then there's love. And then that's love.
Mm.
Does that make sense? Did I get that out?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I'm just going to disagree a little bit here.
Okay, cool.
just to get something going. You know, I totally agree with, and that seems totally right, that obviously, you know, there is a point to individuation, otherwise it wouldn't happen. I mean, you know, if there was no point to us appearing as this or that or somebody else, you know, it wouldn't happen. I mean, that's obvious, right?
Good.
So,
yeah.
And so I totally agree that there is something, that there is this, and it is a mystery ultimately. I mean, my sense is it's a mystery how that all comes about. That somehow there is this consciousness that takes all these different forms that are even, like, you know, difficult to experience. Like, you know, I'm German. I come with this German heritage of the Third Reich and Hitler and, you know, concentration camps, and I mean, I'll be talking to one of the teachers on the retreat on that question specifically, you know, like how to be with what is violent and repulsive and seemingly just not love at all in this universe. And
Yeah.
so you know, it takes all these forms, and yes, there is a process that takes us into separate identity as we develop. I mean, you know, like you say, children develop. I remember as a child, you know, being very spacious. I mean, sitting, you know, I have this memory, it's always been with me, sitting on a sandbox outside in our yard and philosophizing about the world, you know, just kind of wondering what this was all about. And but from a place that was very spacious, you know, that was in that mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally lost it. I mean, you know, I really lost it until much later. So the individuation can go kind of awry, if you want, and we lose that sense of.
It's a very common, I think, what you described there. In one way it did happen to me, in one way it didn't happen to me. But I hear exactly what you're saying, Grace. And obviously, you know, there's things that are happening in this process which cause us problems, and which but I think what my sense is, and I'm going to talk with it on a very general level rather than specifics, because my sense of the general movement is that when you look in a baby's eyes, it's there right from the start. In fact, it's there so clearly you can't miss it. Looking in my little girl's eyes, literally the moment she opened her eyes for the very first time, and she happened to be looking at me, and just that whole, it's like the Buddha. It's just, oh my goodness, that huge, spacious, vast, empty presence.
Yes.
But she didn't know that. I knew that. Yeah. She had to come into being conscious, and that meant breaking the world up, giving things names, coming to separateness. Now, as that happens, I think you're right. There is always this background. The background's there the whole time. And for some kids, especially, they're very aware of it. I was, and clearly you were. And I see that in my kids and other people. So it's there, and you're right. But still, they're coming in. And then when we come in, we literally, I mean, literally, don't we? We grow into it. Our cells multiply, our thoughts multiply, we get bigger, and we come in, and by the time we're in, we're now in the world where we're competent adults, and we're separate, and we're able to function in the world. We don't need someone to look after us in the same way. But you're right, what we've lost, and you watch kids do this, don't you? You lose that magic. You can see you're with them 1 minute, and it's almost like a darshan hit, because you're with them and you're getting that magic, and then they get a little bit older, and it starts to go. My sense is that obviously it'd be lovely if it didn't, and I don't think it ever does completely, but that there's a natural process happening here, whereby you come in, and then the journey, once you're in, another journey starts, which is the spiritual journey, which is the journey back into yourself, but you're retracing what you did unconsciously, but you're now doing it consciously, which is why when you come back into this place where you're the deep self, where you wake up, it feels incredibly childlike, because it's the, you know, when I come back here, it's like there's a little Tim, there's a baby, when I look in your eyes and I see deeply enough, I see the moment your eyes first opened. And so what we're discovering is a kind of a paradoxical circle. You come in, you lose it, but then you can find it, but now consciously.
Yes.
And maybe I can just say this, that because, like we were saying, because oneness, awareness in itself, if you like, is unconscious, it only becomes conscious in separateness. If we need to enter separateness to become conscious, you know, people say to me often, Tim, I want to be one with everything. And my standard reply, just for the hell of it, is I just go, that's easy, go to sleep. Because in deep sleep, you're one with everything. You just don't know it. And of course, they can say, that's not what I mean. And it's not. What they mean is, I want to be consciously one. And that means to be separate and not separate. It means to enter into the separateness, so you're conscious, but to reflect on yourself so that you're also aware of this all-embracing oneness of being, which is at the ground. And so what I see is that process is mirrored actually in our lives. We come in, we're one, but we don't know it. We become separate, so we get lost, and then we reflect back on ourselves, so we're separate and not separate. And that archetypal journey is one way of describing, I think, what goes on in the life process and the spiritual awakening process.
And actually, I think it also happens for a lot of people with awakening. You know, they wake up, they have this huge experience, and then they lose it.
Of course, yes.
And then they get back to it. Then they're actually really searching.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, it becomes, in the end, it's a process of integration whereby the two, the oneness and the separateness, become part of the experience.
Yes, for me, I've developed this approach which I call paralogical or paradoxical, because it feels, you know, it's a big subject, and I don't want to move too far away from the love theme, but it seems like everything in life is paradoxical, and so that's why for me, it's not that it's non-dual, it's that it's non-dual and dual. That's the mystery. That it's paradox. The yin yang captures it perfectly. That's the great paradox. So everything has that quality to it. So it's formless and form. So we're separate and not separate. And why love is so central to me is that love is the experience that happens in my vulnerable little tender Tim thing. That's what happens to this when I wake up to the hugeness of my deeper identity. And then there's this lovely thing. One of the things you sent in the notes when you were talking about what you were doing with this retreat, which I loved, was you talked about devotional love. And I think integrating back in that sense of devotional love into non-dual philosophy is a great thing to do. Because I don't know what's happening where you are, but in the UK it seems to be lost somewhat, because there's that, because again, it's relational, and that's what's lovely. Is that for me, it's like if I come into Tim, I have this relational love with God, goddess, oneness, whatever I want to, the mystery, and that is it's a lovely thing. The same as I have a relational thing with you, or I can step back into this and it's all one, and there's no relationship between anything, and they coexist. They don't. I don't have to choose between them, because they're both perspectives which I can enjoy.
Yeah. I mean, that there's an aliveness in the devotion that, to me, just, I mean, it just brings the heart alive.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, for me, it's a love affair with love.
Yeah.
With the beloved.
Yeah.
And I mean, I wouldn't want to do without that, because it's just so beautiful. And there's this kind of oscillation, it's like one moment I'm in this love, and the next moment there just is love.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's like a dance almost.
It is.
It goes back and forth, and it's just very wonderful.
I know. I love those dance or making love. I mean, it's that whole dynamic of two and one, two and one, two and one, two and one. Am I two? Am I one? Am I two? Am I one? That's the mystery. I feel that's what we're in, to get to really explore that. The impossible. There's a lovely line in T.S. Eliot in the Four Quartets, one of the poets I love. He talks about this is the impossible. This is where the impossible union of spheres is made actual. Like here, it's impossible that it can be both, but it is. It is. Everything about this is not either this or this. It's both. It's both. It's both. And yeah, it just blows me away when I see that.
Yeah.
I was having a conversation. I was running a day recently, just a few days ago. Yeah, and when I do what I'm trying to bring into the world is the thing which I touched when I was a kid and have been touching ever since. What I want to bring in is I just want to share my obsession with the big love.
Yes.
So I want to get together with people and them to feel the,
I totally get that too.
It's like, that's it. There's nothing else. And this guy, a lovely young man, really got it. Well, everyone really got it, which is in a way as well, is how quickly people can just get it and feel it. But he'd been going to a lot of spiritual things and non-dual things, and he said yes. And I did some questions, and he said something about yes, but don't you think we're and I can't remember what he said, but it was something like in the formless, everything is just functioning of itself in the formless something, and it really struck me. It's like, yeah, that was all correct. I could see exactly what he was saying, and as a philosopher, I went, yeah, got it. But is that really the language? Is that the language we wanted to choose to describe this miracle that's happening right now of life and of feeling and of connection and of being on this journey of suffering and joy and heartbreak and imagination and vision and being lost and broken and all of the things which make up life? Do we want the language of non-dual, formless functioning? Is that really the language we want? Or do we want a language which actually captures something of the immensity of the multifarious qualities of our experience and does that some sort of justice? And that's that I'm much more drawn to that, I think, these days.
Yeah.
Juicy, as you said.
Yes, and that's why I wanted to speak to you, Tim, because a lot of the teachers I will be speaking to will will take more of that line, of the absolute. And I know it very well, and in myself, I'm kind of in that paradox. I'm maybe less sanguine in taking the side of the the love of the manifold, because, and here's why, because there is an experience in the moment, the very much the present moment experience. If there's a total emptiness, there's no structure that structures that moment in any way. What comes through is pure aliveness, just life as it happens to be in that moment. And obviously it needs some kind of psychological structure to be expressed. It needs language to be
Grace,
spoken.
can I just stop you there for a second? Because
No.
I think you just hit it. That's it.
Right.
What you just said there. Because you just said, if you're in the moment and there's this structureless quality to it, there's an aliveness.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you said, of course, it needs some sort of psychological structure to express it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. The two sit side by side. There's an aliveness because you see the mystery. Mm-hmm. You see that you're just in front of the moment, and then there's the story. There's life. There's humanity, and that's still there. It hasn't. And those people that say it's gone anywhere, honestly, I just don't believe them, because we're sitting in the same room taking the same because the very language we use. This is the paradox, surely. People say things like, I'm just totally in the moment, but they're saying it with words. Those sounds wouldn't make any sense if it wasn't for the past. You wouldn't start a sentence if you didn't know where it was going to end in the future. We need to be more clear about the way we express ourselves in this important area, because otherwise we fall into absurdity. And what I feel is that whenever we choose one side over the other, either way, we fall into absurdity. But when we can see they always coexist, then we can actually express what we are genuinely, authentically experiencing, which I suspect is pretty much the same thing, all of us, which is this incredible, at our best, this formless awakening expressing itself in separate form. And it's side by side. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I needed to interrupt because I just wanted to capture that moment. I do apologize if that wasn't where you were going. I just couldn't resist trying to mirror that back, because it felt like that was the crux of the conversation we're having.
Yeah, it is. So let's just keep going on that one. See, here's my sense of where we do need to be how do I put this? There is a point in distinguishing between, the egoic structure and a structure that is open enough so that this aliveness can come through in the moment. Because, when the egoic structure is very tight and very contracted, people become very predictable. And there actually isn't a space in which this aliveness can come through, because, people are just in their reactive patterns, and they come up, and, and everybody else knows that's how they're going to react, and they themselves know that's how they're going to react. Sure. So, if somebody says A, they're going to go, "Wah!" because that's what they always do. So there's no sense of true, I'd say that's just a very contracted way of being that is very predictable. And that's not in the moment, because, the reactivity is based on, past experience, thoughts that this person has, emotions that this person has. and it's pretty much predictable, right? So to me, the litmus test of how much somebody is stuck in their separateness is how unpredictable can they be? How free are they in the moment?
Yeah.
You know, to really just be with what is, and maybe do something that they didn't even know was going to happen before they actually did it or said it.
I feel I should do something unpredictable now, Grace. How about this? How about this? This is something. Here you go. This is unpredictable. This is something I haven't talked about hardly at all because this is something I'm playing with right now. I spend an awful lot of time looking at the moment and perceiving it in different ways and questioning ways I have perceived it and opening up new things. One of the ways I found very, very fertile to look at it is to go, is that it seems that one of the great paradoxes of the moment, it is that it actually contains, or is the meeting of what I call the past and the possible. That's what the moment is. It is the impossible union of spheres. It is where the past and the possible meet. I don't use the word future because I don't want to say that it's. I don't feel that it's like something which is laid out or something which is deterministic. It's rather the vast possibility, and everything that's ever happened is meeting right now, in this moment. And I am also that. So Tim is everything that Tim has ever experienced, meeting everything that Tim could experience or Tim could do, or all the possibilities. So what I see is that in the moment, it's not that, they're both in the moment. The moment is the meeting of those two. You can't have one without the other. You can't be in the moment as if it's not containing the past or doesn't contain the possible. It is both. That's the nature of the moment. The choice I have is that if my attention is really sucked into the past, then I will repeat that. And the more that I need the past, because it's my foundation, like I said, it's my language, everything about me. I need it. But if my attention is really pulled into it, then that's when it's completely habitual. It's just running on automatic. It's expanding from the past. And what being awake, one way of describing what it is, I think, is that my attention is also in the possible, in this place of formlessness, of imagination, of creativity, where I'm also can see all of these other possibilities that can arise from this moment, and bring that to bear. Now, it has to come to bear on the past. It can't come to bear on anything else. It can only come to bear on where we are right now, which is the past. But I can bring the possible to bear on it. And what I hear you saying is, if you are tight in what you said, your egoic structures, the way I'd say the same thing would be, if you are sucked into purely the way that you've been in your past, rather than it being a foundation for aliveness, it's a prison, or it's just a repetitive conditioning.
Right.
If you then take exactly the same thing, and you also have this awakeness, it's the foundation from which you take your next step. Nothing to get rid of, nothing, no prison, nothing. It's now a playground. It's now something from which you're feeling this enlivenment is naturally emerging.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd see it slightly differently, Tim, in that in the moment, true awakeness to me, and that's also true love, is just that total openness. And then whatever comes, there's not like an array of things, of possibilities, but one thing that shows up. And that's it, or that's done. Because that's what happens to show up.
But from your own self, Grace, so you're saying that if you're in an egoic structure where it's repetitive, that isn't just allowing whatever to show up, is it? Then you're going.
Yes,
Because if otherwise, can you see we've got a paradox here? There's one part of the, and I get both. You know, there's one part which goes, okay, you can come into the witness, or you can be with the big presence, and things just arise as they are. You embrace them as they are.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, you're going. One wants to say, if you're stuck in yourself, then it becomes habitual. Well, that's just arising also, but that's a negative type of arising now.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Again, we need to be very clear and go, okay, what's the difference between these? And my feeling is, look, that's the polarity of my nature. My nature, like when I dream at night, my nature now is both to be a character in the dream of life and the dreamer, the awareness, the formless dreamer, both. Now, if I can live lucidly, like I dream lucidly, if I can be conscious of that, then there is a deep part of me which is just allowing it all to arise, whatever it is, and embracing it with that big love. And then there's Tim, who's in a process of waking up, trying to be less conditioned, find a different response, who's learning, who's growing, who's going, God, I did that really badly. That was a real mistake. It's getting a bit wiser, hopefully, and more open, and it's going, oh, look, I closed there, don't I? Why do I do that? Oh, it's because of whatever. And is in a process of evolving and growing. And those two are just kind of they're happening at the same time. They're not. It's not. I don't have to be one or the other.
Well, to me, they come together in the moment when there is just, like you say, an embrace of even the egoic tendencies that arise. You know, I mean, I'm not a saint. You know, they rise in me, and sometimes they get the better of me, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes I see them and I can spot them, and I can say, "Oh, I can let that go." But sometimes I'm not, and even that's embraced. You know, I mean, if I'm stuck in my conditioning, then that's what's happening. But it's not very, you know, it's like what I observe also is that when I'm stuck, the love is not there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I observe that in other people too. So you know, there is a sense in which the you know, the egoic structure really limits that and actually kind of kills it. So
I think the place where we've got into this conversation, and you know, I don't want to just get stuck on ourselves on this part of a conversation, but I think really that all I'm saying is a nuance, which is I agree completely. We get stuck in the egoic structure, but because there is so much attack on the ego, this concept, which I don't even know sometimes what people mean because it varies so much, that there is something wrong, there's a thing in Tim which is bad, there's a separate self, there's an I, there's a thing that I have to get rid of. And you know, and God knows, Grace, I spent decades trying to do that, and the bugger won't go. He just won't go. I've tried, and I just won't. He's not going anywhere. And my feeling now is, look, that was all mistaken. That was all mistaken. There was nothing ever to get rid of. What there was the opposite to see as well. I didn't need to get rid of Tim. I just need to see the opposite of Tim. I needed to see God or oneness, or it's not that I don't have to choose either this or this. That they both coexist. So the egoic confinement, the lack of love, is all there when I don't see God or the beloved or the opposite. When I see that as well, that same thing, which was confining me, that Timness, that separate, is now expressing that, and there's love, and he's okay. Actually, he's still not a saint, but he's okay, and all I needed to do was encourage him and let him flower, and I don't. So what I'm saying is, look, I don't need to be here with my kids as they're growing up, going, you know, don't get an ego now, and don't develop a separate self, and things which would be unthinkable, and so I don't need to do that myself. So what I want to see happen myself, is I want us to change the way we use language so that we don't create those kind of the idea of something in us which is a problem, and rather see there's something ambiguous about us, which if seen in isolation will be a problem, but which if seen within wholeness will actually be a beautiful thing. And not perfect, still ambiguous, but beautiful. And that, I think, that feels much healthier to me. I think that's probably where I react to the language of ego, because of all of that, that past stuff.
So I totally hear you, Tim, and I just, it's so tricky, isn't it? Because the moment we use language to make distinctions, which sometimes are important because it's important to see things clearly as a way of understanding. So the moment we use distinctions, they have a way of becoming set in stone, right? And then one is good and the other one's bad. So, the ego comes to be the baddie, which, it's just useful to see. It's just useful to see what happens. And, just as a note on the personal versus the universal, I mean, my experience, your experience, it's everybody's experience. When there is constriction through habitual structures, we don't even need to call them ego structures, there is, the love is lost because the spacious oneness, beingness is lost.
Yeah.
And yes, love includes everything. It includes even that. And, my sense is that actually we can become much more loving if we stop beating the ego and beating ourselves up for still having some ego things, and maybe they'll always be there, I mean, who knows?
That's
even Ramana Maharshi was sometimes known to get quite angry and so or impatient. And as far as I can tell, that some structures persist, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I think to me, it's again the paradox. It's like what I've come to, and it may be that I'm exploring something different to other people, and maybe we're all exploring different things, and that's great. But the thing which I am certainly seem to be committed to exploring now is this paradox of waking up to this deep, deep, spacious oneness, and at the same time allowing it to inform and to express itself, so that there's a self-realization and a self-expression, like know yourself and show yourself. So through Tim, and Tim is he's a vulnerable guy who is got great things about him and bad things about him, and can be really great company and can be a pain in the butt, and that is, he's a human being. And he could be, I could be lifted up one moment, and it would be so easy for life to pick me up and turn me on my head, and I would never ever want to stand before the majesty of life and go, yes, I've arrived, or I am fully realized, or like things which I can't even conceive or people would say them. And because because Tim isn't that. Tim is a guy who born in the West Country of Yeovil, had these particular experiences, is well-meaning and does his best. And then there's this, which is all of us. And it's perfect and huge and beautiful. And the more that I touch it, the more it does transform Tim. And Tim, as you say, Tim then, when he's in touch with that, Tim becomes the lover, is love, and he isn't that tight, and he's much more expansive. And I can bring that love into the world. And whenever I do that, it looks like it's a really good thing. And so I want, for me, the process of awakening is this very natural, like, let's wake up to this together, so that our humanity, just as it is, can be informed by that love, and then we can make this experience we're having a lot better, and we can hold our hands and each other's hands through the suffering and dance when in the good times, and that's what I want to see us. That's what I just intuitively feel like it would be great if we could do that, and the more we do that, the better it is.
Yes, yeah, and I mean your gift to the world in that is just beautiful and beautifully clear, and wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, you're very sweet. Thank you. I'm very lucky. I know that, Grace, that I get the chance to share it, and doubly lucky because I don't know, Grace. I mean, you know, I meet a lot of people. I've been exploring spirituality since I was a teenager, so 40 years. I met a lot of people along the way. You know, I'm so, the greatest thing for me is that because of where I've arrived with this, I really feel like I can be Tim. And so, and that's such a relief. It looks very, very, you know, it looks, being a teacher when you can't be yourself and have got to be perfect and fully realized and all the rest of it, that looks like a really lonely place to be to me. Because, and kind of like old hat, it feels like,
ultimately it's a very unloving place. I mean, that's how it always felt to me, you know.
Yes, because if, you know, it's like when I see somebody and they're on a stage with somebody who's lower down, or any, it's like the whole point to me is how can we help each other feel the empowerment of our own deep self? So anything which takes that away feels like is moving in the opposite direction. It feels like that's an old model to me of how we used to do that, and it's to do with all sorts of other things, power and other than love. And what we need is a complete revolution in the way that we communicate about this, so that it really is us, that we see it, we are, that because there's one of us, it's about us, and that is about love. Then it becomes very clearly about love.
Well, you know, Tim, I'd say, I mean, that's the beauty of the manifold, because, you know, you're very clear in being very kind of non-hierarchical, very much just Tim, inviting others into a wonderful experience, you know. And then there are more traditional teachers. I mean, my own teacher comes, Gangaji is in a much more traditional setup in the way that she teaches, but you know, the love is very palpable in her too. That's what attracted me.
Of course, and there's room for all these.
And you know, different things work for different people. I mean, that's the beauty of that manifold.
They do. I come from a music background. I used to be a musician, and there's, I mean, I feel as a personality type, I'm far more the artist type than I am the spiritual teacher type, which is why I never use the name. I don't like it. And it feels to me like, but it's funny how that in these other forms of human endeavor, science and art, things move on very fast. And as someone who really loves that evolutionary quality to life, an awful lot of spirituality seems very stuck in the past, not the possible. It seems to repeating itself. It's desperately trying to wake us up by repeating itself. The irony is just too much, and it just feels like, oh, come on, guys, you know, we need to make this a bit more jazz now. You know, we haven't even, you know, we're never even, you know, we're still stuck in classical. We haven't, you know, we're never going to reach rock and roll at this rate, and it just needs to really, you know, move through the forms a bit now, and catch up with itself. Of course, lots of people are doing that. There's people doing all sorts of imaginative things, and that's wonderful. And you know, at the end of the day, to bring it back to our theme, at the end of the day, for me, the thing I'm always looking for is the love. So I don't care what style someone's adopting with this. If I can see the love, I feel like we're part of the same thing. If I don't see that, it feels like maybe it's not. Maybe I'm not so sure what's going on there. So
Yeah.
that's what the love is always the touchstone for me. If it's not, if that's
Mm-hmm.
not there, then it feels like I can't. I just don't relate to it in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. And ultimately that's got to be the criterion, right? I mean, because the love is, like you say, it's either there or it isn't, and it communicates itself instantly. I
Yeah.
mean, it
Yeah.
just the because we're all one in it. If it's there in another, we can just kind of sink into it, and it's like, oh, so beautiful.
Now, having just said that, I'm now going to add the opposite, because I realise I must. Because there's when you talk about love, the problem with love, the thing with anything is it can get, it's when you see one side. So actually, I have this line which somebody's put on a card for me that's gone out to everyone, and it says, "Love always works," and it's a great line. I love that. Love always works. Like, whoa, wow, that's a confronting thought. Of course, not true as well, because actually, I'm sure we all know that you can love and love and love, and you need the wisdom to actually bring it into the world. And you need. I think of love and wisdom as the same thing, like two sides of the same thing. Love and wisdom, one gained by experience, one in the moment, just that embracing. So love is just and wisdom is how to integrate that into life. And I mean, just to say what I mean, for instance, my dad, lovely man, also an alcoholic, loving my dad was eventually I could see that the love that my mum showed my dad was keeping him an alcoholic, for instance. So, and when she got the wisdom to turn that around, he turned around, and at the age of 84, went to rehab and stopped being an alcoholic. So. So we need that wisdom. So it's like I'm looking for the love, but there's also something else too. I don't think it isn't quite as simple as I was saying, because there's always the opposite, the other side, the other pole. And the other pole for me, which I'm also always looking for, is I really I don't feel comfortable with absolutism. Any form of absolutism, any form of, I don't mind authority, because people have authority, the authority of experience. I've experienced this, I can help you with this. My plumber has authority because he knows how to mend my bath. I don't. It's brilliant, and I respect him for it. But what I have real trouble with is this kind of, I have arrived somewhere where my words have an absolute quality, whether it's in religion or indeed in the spirituality of awakening, that it's somehow, or I'm channeling God, or I'm channeling somebody, or any of these areas where we lose that sense that everything I say is coming through Tim, and Tim is relative. Nothing can come from the absolute through me, which is still absolute. And that it's really important to have that, so that we don't elevate or allow people to elevate themselves into an absolute place, because nothing will disempower us as much as that, and ultimately that will lead us in the wrong direction. So I think there is another side I look for as well as love, and it's that. Wow, where did we get to with this conversation? We've been all over the place here.
I don't know, that's very good. I think we're right on the topic.
Good.
Maybe we just need to mention that also the love can take a more maybe a more individuated form, more emotional form, or it can be very still. It can be very spacious, and the more it is in that stillness and spaciousness, the more it comes from that and is an expression of that, the less conditional it will be. So I'm not sure that I agree with you that anything absolute is suspicious. I actually quite
No, I haven't explained myself very clearly then, Grace, for which I apologise.
Okay.
I'm not the thing I was saying about the absolute is not to do with the absolute love or anything like that. That's it. What I'm trying to. It was about this thing we were talking about, how we looking for that love in teachers and traditions and forms of spirituality. And I wanted to add to that the thing which I am also looking for is the absence of absolutism in the sense that people claiming to have the absolute truth. I've arrived at the absolute truth, the full realization, the ultimate enlightenment. He's completely this, completely that. I find that incredibly difficult and doesn't ring true to me, because it feels that because of the paradox, everything is coming through a limited individual and will be informed by that, so that if people speak the words of absolutism, that's where you end up with the Catholic Church. That's where you end up with very difficult. I'm not going to name names, but you know all the difficult gurus and figures that have been really very, very painful to watch unwind. The sort of horrors that have been going on, and in the center of something which is about love, and you're getting abuse and God knows what. So, and it's because of this absolutism. Because absolutism takes people's power away, because it's not true, because no one can speak the absolute. We can only no one can do that. We can only offer each other our own relative understanding, and we can do that with humility and with love. I think it'll be really positive, and move away from that kind of that absolutism. That's the one I mean. Did I explain that clearer then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And, I guess the way that I would put it is that the absolute basically, it cannot be expressed anyway. It's so beyond words.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a kind of natural humility there. That just, that just says, well, this is how I'm expressing it now, but I know that ultimately, it's not even possible to express it.
What I always want to start. We didn't do it in our conversation, but certainly when I run things or speak, I nearly always start with mystery, because it feels if we can meet in the authenticity of, oh my God, I have no idea what this is. It's so, like you said, beyond anything that little Tim can come up with. If that huge mystery, and then we can meet in it and go, okay, now let's have a conversation exploring it. We meet as equals. We meet with openness, and I think the thing which I see is that when I get together with folks and I do my mystery experience retreats, and it doesn't matter whether I'm in Japan or Europe or America or wherever it is, what I see is that people come, they have an expectation, usually, of there's going to be spiritual. So they're kind of tight, because they think it's going to be spiritual. They think it's got to be a certain way.
So they can't be themselves, basically. They have to be spiritual.
Yeah. And then once we've broken that down, and once we've created enough safety for people to be what they are, and once they get the idea that what I'm suggesting to them is that they can just be what they are, which is all this person that is what it is, and this, that just once the separateness is just allowed or loved or accepted,
yes,
the oneness just opens up of itself. It's just there, and suddenly, a few hours later, you've got people right in the big love, completely like, oh my God. Now, that is incredibly exciting, I think, because all I've done, is just go, it's okay to be what you are, and let's create a safe space where we can see this oneness in each other.
Yes.
And then the love just bang. And it's not like a have I got it, because you can't miss it. It's in your body. It's so it's just
it's just
and that excites me. That feels like heavens. I would, when I first experienced this, and through the 70s and 80s and exploring it, it would never have seemed possible to me that could happen. And yet there it is. I'm witnessing it happening, and I suspect there's a lot of other people as well as me seeing that happen around the planet.
Yeah. Well, how I understand what happens is when people are allowed to be themselves, they stop being in a struggle with themselves, which is an egoic thing, it's like resisting what is. So basically, love is just open to whatever is. And so if there's an openness to how people are, you've already kind of set the space in a way that invites love, and then yes, it is very easy.
It's sweet to see how ready we are.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think. It's sweet to see how ready we are, given the right environment and the right I don't know, the setting, the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It's just sweet to see, and not just how some people, but just about everybody.
Mm-hmm.
What I love seeing is how there is. You can have teenagers and 80-year-olds and men and women and because I'm a philosopher, I get a lot of intellectuals.
Mm-hmm.
They think I'm coming for a lecture, and because I'm also about love, you get a lot of people who are into feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm about, I love the body, so I get all of these different sorts of people who are so different, and it makes no difference.
Mm-hmm.
It's different, but it makes no difference and it's very sweet to see how ready we are, given the right thing, to just go, ooh. And there it is, not 20 years of staring at a white wall, meditating, trying to get rid of my ego, which is what I thought I had to do. But just right there all the time, always there, had been there all along. That kind of, now, of course, people don't stay in it. Things go through, life, comes back, they're on a journey. It's not like forever. But nevertheless, to touch it really deeply, it feels, as often as we can, that feels, And I think it's another element of the non-dual world which frustrates me, Grace, sometimes, or I don't relate to when I get involved in it, along with all the things I do relate to, of course, I want to say, which I think are wonderful. It is a kind of a dryness that somehow it's as if you have a good experience, if you say, yes, I was enchanted and ecstatic, it's kind of like, oh, really? Well, but the real absolute is not like that. It's just, it's there in the washing up, and it's there, and of course it is. But again, in our humanity, we need to be enchanted.
Yes.
We need to feel the sweetness or the bittersweetness. We need to feel, and that's not dry. It isn't just beyond experience. It's in experience. That's why we like it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tim, I think that's a good moment to end the conversation because we've already gone over the hour.
Oh.
And actually, that was why why this retreat theme arose for me, because I just, myself being of a devotional kind of nature, I just knew that dryness that can be there in non-dual circles, teachings, it wasn't all that is true. I mean, it just, something just felt it was missing. So thank you for spelling that out so beautifully for us, and for presenting it so beautifully. And you exude that also. So I can see how the spark just kind of springs over to everybody. And thank you for bringing that to our retreat. It's very beautiful color and flavor that you bring to it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity and for a wonderful conversation, and I hope it's adds a little bit of something to all the other wonderful people that you're talking to.
Yes, I just, what it added for me, I mean, I loved the conversation. It's like I like to do a little bit of sparring from time to time, and with most spiritual people I can't do this, but But with you, it just flowed very naturally. So I really enjoyed myself.
Oh, me too. Me too, very much.
So I just want to say, if you want to find out more about Tim Freke, you can find that out on the website, the livingfromlove.com website. You can also go to his website, which is themysteryexperience.com. And if you enjoyed the conversation and you want to support the retreat, feel free to make a donation. I'm open to donations, always. And thank you for listening. Thank you again to Tim. And I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.